But just remember that us freedom folk will always fight for your freedom to protect yourself however you see fit. But you safety savages continually come after our freedom. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's just James, and I'm just here trying to change your perspective. I want to continue my discussion on masks that I started in my last video, or the one before that, I'm not sure. I'll put a link to it up here and at the end of this video if you haven't seen part 1. But today I want to talk about the case against masks. I read a great book that you can order online called The Case Against Masks, and I'm going to go through some more of her arguments and then some of my own. In order to start, I'm going to start with the CDC. I think that they've lost a lot of credibility in my book. I already had my doubts about them, but through this entire pandemic, I've really lost a lot of faith in them. And I know a lot of other people who agree with that as well, that they really have dropped the ball in this scenario. But nonetheless, they put out a document, the U.S. Department of Labor and OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, put out a document dictating, telling companies how they needed to proceed. One of the things they said was that that symptoms may occur within 2 to 14 days of exposure. They say that the virus is thought to spread mainly from person to person with close contact within 6 feet and through respiratory droplets produced when infected persons coughs or sneezes. These droplets can land in the mouths or noses of people who are nearby or be inhaled in the lungs. The document continues by saying it may be possible that a person can get COVID-19 by touching a surface or object that has the virus on it and then touching the eyes, nose, or mouth. This is not thought to be the primary way the virus spreads. People are thought to be most contagious when symptomatic, meaning fever, cough, or shortness of breath. There have been reports of asymptomatic spreading, but that is certainly not the main form of transmission. It's less clear whether or not we're able to transmit the virus from a surface, but really the question is not how long it might live on a surface, but rather how infectious is it if we get it from that surface, right? Because after it's been in the air for a few minutes in dry air, especially if it's been in heat, the virus has been rendered useless. So we should not be concerned about it. It at that point is essentially like a little mini vaccine, right? Something for your body to get used to. I know that you guys only like to get your vaccines jabbed into your body parts, but I prefer to get mine the natural way. Now keep in mind that the amount of exposure that you have to a virus is directly related to the likelihood that you're going to get sick. This is the idea behind viral load. So her example in the book is the difference between one soldier storming the beaches of Normandy and 500,000 soldiers storming the beaches of Normandy. Which one is going to have a bigger impact, right? That is the idea of, so if you, essentially meaning that if you pick up a partial, if somebody sneezes on something that has the virus on it, and then 10 minutes later, after it's been sitting out in the hot sun, let's say it's a railing, it's sitting out in the hot sun, and you come by and touch it, and then 5 minutes after that, you touch your nose or something, you're probably going to be okay. The whole idea behind vaccines is that you are exposing yourself to a small amount of a virus at a time, and it's a less effective, less strong, aggressive form of the virus. That the virus is actually the least of the concerns of the anti-vaccine movement. It's all the things that go along with the virus. The irony is about vaccines is that the body has to have all the extra harsh chemicals and heavy metals in it to force a reaction, because your body really handles a broken down virus, or a virus that is no longer viable. It handles it fairly well, and so it doesn't even bother to remember it because it's just insignificant. They have to add all that extra stuff to aggravate your immune system to force a reaction from you. That's the harm that is seen from the anti-vaccine movement. A study was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in May of 2020. It was published before that, but in May of 2020, USA Today reported about it. And it was found that viable coronavirus could live on some surfaces like plastic and stainless steel for 3 days and cardboard for 24 hours. The CDC reported that genetic material from the Diamond Princess cruise was recovered after 17 days. Neither of these two studies have any impact on the situation. In fact, Joseph Vinetz, who is the professor of medicine at Yale University and the infectious disease researcher, said that the CDC report has zero relevance to the ongoing epidemic. Meaning, what are you doing, CDC? You're not helping anybody. It's highly likely that the genetic material that was found on the cruise ship 17 days later was found there because more than likely they parked that cruise ship once everybody got off of it and nobody touched it, because I'm sure they wanted it preserved so that they could go in and do all these tests. So for 17 days, it probably sat in a port, warm and humid and closed off, no fresh air. That's a perfect breeding ground for all kinds of stuff. That's where viruses and bacteria thrive. So just because it was found there doesn't mean that it was replicating. It was just there. And I've said from the very beginning of this, if you look for a virus, you will find it. They're everywhere. But it's a matter of how violent that virus is, how much of a threat is it really to you. Another professor from Yale University said, the process of a person getting infected with COVID-19 by touching a surface requires the outer shell of the virus to remain intact, which remains difficult with proper hand washing and surface cleaning. Now, this is your friendly reminder to wash your hands. Do not rely on hand sanitizer. It has been linked to hormone disruption and cancer and all sorts of other things. So if you're somebody who's trying to get pregnant and you bathe in hand sanitizer, then maybe you need to cut back some. If you're going through menopause and you're having really heavy symptoms, maybe cut back on hand sanitizer. There's all sorts of things that are linked to that. It's the cheap man's way of washing their hands. Okay, so let's just go over some statistics about this coronavirus. 42% of deaths came from 0.6% of the population, which would be long-term care facilities, nursing homes, and assisted living facilities. Some states, it was upwards of 70 to 80% of all deaths were from long-term care facilities. Specifically, New York, New Jersey, and Michigan all ordered nursing homes to accept infected patients from the hospital. The article I was referring to earlier quoted Stanford epidemiologist John Lenodis, who said even some mild or common cold type coronaviruses have been known for decades to cause case fatality of upwards of 8% when infecting a nursing home. So this is not a huge shock. Patients with underlying health conditions are 6 times more likely to get hospitalized and 12 times more likely to die. Underlying conditions that lead to mortality with this novel coronavirus are primarily heart disease, lung disease, and diabetes. Healthy people have a 7.6% chance of hospitalization. Now, what exactly is that 7.6% hinging on, right? It says a 7.6% chance of hospitalization, but I'm here to tell you that this is not up to chance, my friend. If you are hydrated, if you are moving, if you are able to take deep breaths and get up off the couch and move around, and if you are able to drink water and get sunlight and have access to good supplements or healthy diet, these are the things that are going to make that 7.6% chance of a healthy person. I would argue that more than half of our country is chronically dehydrated, and in that condition alone, nobody is healthy. Healthy people have a 1.6% chance of dying or a 98.4% survival rate. More recent data has suggested a 0.004% chance of dying and a 99.96% chance of survival. And again, I say chance. It's not chance. Your health is your responsibility. There are, maybe not all of it, maybe there are some things where you were just dealt a bad card or a bad hand, but there are still bukus of things that you can do to steer your health in the direction that you would have it to go. Maybe the most definitive analysis of this mask situation was made back in May of 2020, and it was posted in the New England Journal of Medicine, and it says, "We know that wearing a mask outside of healthcare facilities offers little, if any, protection." It goes on to say that you must have face-to-face contact within 6 feet for several minutes, and the chances of catching it in passing is minimal. For example, the Diamond Princess, again, just because you're finding the virus does not always mean that it's killing people, right? The study finishes by saying, in many cases, the desire for widespread masking is a reflexive reaction to anxiety over the pandemic. And this was back in May of 2020 in the New England Journal of Medicine. Now, I had the argument presented to me that masks work because this person said that she works in a lab and they test human tissue that is going to be used for transplants and different things like that. So they wear masks when they're testing the tissue, and her argument was that masks work because after they are using the tissue, they test the tissue again for bacteria and it tests negative, meaning that the masks are protecting the tissue. And my argument back to that is, yes, in situations like that, a mask is appropriate. But how many other things in that lab are going into the conducive environment to protect that tissue, right? It's not just the mask, it's the gloves, it's the way that you are around that environment. If you're working in a sterile field or a laboratory environment, you're not moving around and doing all kind of stuff. You're very still. Everything is just so. It's very different when you're talking about children wearing masks. I think that is probably the worst, most egregious thing because children are just naturally dirty people. I guess you could maybe make the argument that they're getting, again, like a little mini vaccine on their face because it's just got to be full of germs because kids just touch everything. Before I was diagnosed with ADHD, as a kid, I was always just told that I was hyperactive and that I moved too much and I was a wiggle worm. But in all reality, like in hindsight, a lot of that was attributed to my clothes. My clothes would annoy me to no end. To this day, if my clothes bother me, it's all I can think about. So I can just imagine how little I would be learning if I had to wear a face mask all the time. So in a sterile lab in a surgical field, yes, of course you want to wear a mask. You don't want your surgeon sneezing into your abdominal cavity. You don't want your dentist sneezing into your mouth. You don't want your dentist drooling into your mouth, right? I'm not arguing whether masks work. I'm arguing that we don't need to be giving power to the mask Nazis, and we don't need to be talking about masks like they are the saviors of this pandemic because they are not. After I made my last video, I talked about Sweden, and actually right after I made the video, Sweden came out and announced that they were kind of like heightening their precautions, and I was kind of frustrated, but it still doesn't really negate the point that they have been completely unrestricted for this entire time, and they've fared very well in comparison to a lot of us. Another thing that she talks about in the book is, what about face seal leakage and the backward jet? Okay, so I thought this was interesting. It's kind of, she has this fun little picture. So the idea is that when you sneeze or you cough, it's so forceful that it shoots more of the bacteria or viruses to the edges of your mask, and those are the areas you touch the most, and that it kind of like congregates right there. And then you think that like you're pulling your mask down and like you're covering it over your nose, and then so you're likely at that point to inhale some up your nose, or you're putting it down over your mouth and then it gets in your mouth. Another thing that has been a big deal for me is our deaf population. We have approximately 15% of Americans over the age of 18 that report some sort of hearing problems. 1 in 8 people in America reports having hearing loss over the age of 12. That's just another thing to think about, because I know for me personally and for Ryan, we both have a hard time. I have a hard time just because I need to be looking at somebody and like fully engaged to talk to them, and I can't a lot of times distinguish who's talking. And Ryan has a hard time hearing, and so he just can't hear what people are saying through the mask. My dad can't hear what people are saying, and we've actually had an incident where nobody could go to the doctor with him, and I called up there and asked for them to have somebody in the room with him if he would wear his mask, and somebody else could pull their mask down so that he could understand what was going on, and I was told no. So another weird thing about wearing a mask for me, and I'm curious to know if other people do this too, I keep my mouth wide open, and I didn't notice I was doing it until a couple weeks ago at clinicals, because I don't have to wear it for work. I do pediatric home health, and for the most part, everybody's been okay, because again, with pediatric or with medically fragile and immunocompromised, the flu can take them out just as easily as this coronavirus can. So I'm very fortunate that my family's, nobody has forced me to wear a mask. So the only time I really have to is when I'm at school. And so I have noticed that I will be like, if I'm doing a procedure, or if I'm thinking about something, like we have to wear them when we take our tests. I've really noticed it a lot then, that I will open my mouth really wide, and I can only assume that it's like a response to me needing more oxygen, and so I'm trying to just open my mouth wider to get more air in. But I'm curious to know if anybody else does that, because it's only something I've noticed recently, like in the last month. So here's the bottom line, you guys. This virus is not going anywhere, and I hate to be the one to tell y'all this, but these masks, they're not going to be the end-all be-all of this. You need to learn how to beef up your immune system. Our immune system is like a tank. You can either add to it or you can take away from it. Every time you smoke a cigarette, you reduce your vitamin C by 15 milligrams. Are you building it up, or are you tearing it down? Are you taking vitamin supplements? Are you staying hydrated? Are you managing your stress? I did a video earlier this year. It was my first video, and arguably my most cringy video, but it has a lot of good information in it. It's called How to Survive COVID-19, and it talks about your immune system and how to keep it strong, and some cheap and easy ways that everybody can do that. It's not as hard as people make it out to be. Unfortunately, the medical industry is an industry, and they see our illnesses and our fears as a profit. We all need to be conscious of that and start understanding our bodies and respecting it, and not running to a mask and a vaccine just because we're told to be afraid. It's hard to be healthy, but it's also hard to be sick. Either you're going to have to make time for your health, or you're going to be forced to make time for your illness. It's your decision. You can choose freedom if you want to, and you can choose safety if you want to. But just remember that us freedom folk will always fight for your freedom to protect yourself however you see fit. But you safety savages continually come after our freedom. Alright, that's it for me today, you guys. I'm just James, and I promise I'm just trying to change your perspective and try to make you think a little bit differently. Please consider subscribing to my channel if you liked this video and you want to see more like it. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it. I hear that helps. And please comment and let me know what is the most outrageous abuse of masking that you have seen. I have seen some folks at the beach and at the pool with their masks on. I'm actually surprised I've not heard of anybody drowning with their masks on. I was kind of waiting for that. Not in a good way, but I mean, really, it just doesn't seem like a good idea, right? Anyways, I love you all, and I hope you guys have a blessed week. Stay strong, and I'll see you next time.